Hello, everyone. This is our Spiritist Psychology study group. Today, we're going to be studying, and the topic is the mystery of the encounter and its challenge with Anahy Fonseca. And I would like to hand it over to you, Anahy. Over to you.
Thank you, Fabrizio. So today, and I'm very happy that Professor Lionel Corbett is here with us, so we can discuss together. So I thought of changing the dynamics of the group, okay? I'm not showing a PowerPoint today. And I sent to you, it's in the WhatsApp group, our group, a beautiful chapter, and the author is a Brazilian analyst that I think everybody or most of people know him, Gelson Roberto. He's one of the writers of this beautiful book that is called Reflecting the Soul, the Spiritist Psychology of Joannei de Angelis. So some authors that started many years ago studying Joannei de Angelis and have put together this idea of different groups studying her psychology. So before we start, of course, I would pay attention to synchronicities. And as I was, well, here in Brazil, it's afternoon. I think maybe in UK, it's late at night, or not so late at night, but right? But it's at night. And well, I was just cleaning the kitchen after lunch and listening to a YouTube that just came in my mobile. And look what wonderful, because the meeting today is the mystery of the encounter and its challenges. It's the name of this beautiful chapter by Gelson. And I have it's a free translation, people. I'm not a professional in translating. I don't think this book is translated yet to English, which is a shame, but we are going to get there, right? And everybody that is helping, sorry. So, but it's a beautiful book. It's from 2011. And, but okay, so the synchronicity. I was just listening, just the YouTube put something in my mobile and I was just listening. And I took note to tell you, look, because we all talk in Spiritist knowledge that we are going a transitional phase in consciousness, okay? I know there are a lot of bad things happening, evil things still happening on Earth, all around the globe. But the information that we have from many decades actually now, and not only in Brazil, but a lot of mediums in the United States, for instance, Edgar Cayce, and in Brazil we have, as I told you, many mediums, but especially Chico Xavier and Divaldo Pereira Franco, that psychographs all the books by the spirit Joannei de Angelis. So the information that we have is that we have been going through, in this is decades, of a transitional phase on our collective consciousness, okay? And we are going through a vibrational shift, actually. It's going to take a while. It's not from one day, of course, and not even some years to the others, but this is going on. People talk all over the world about a spiritual awakening. And okay, so the synchronicity is that the person that was talking was about actually, I think she was a hypnotist or whatever. And this person was referring to her and to her wisdom. And well, what the person was saying is that we need an awakening that involves establishing a profound connection with one's higher self. Okay, and I think this would be Jung's self, capital S, as we said, and as Joanna says, calls the spirit, which serves as a direct conduit to the source of all existence. A shift in consciousness that allows us to uplift the vibrational frequency of our collective existence, transcending our limitations. This path is made through the contact with our own truth. It is a profound transformation, and it begins with the understanding of ourselves and the others, exactly what we are going to be discussing today. And the person goes on saying, the gates of the new world, the new era, are open. Imagine a reality where love flows freely, where compassion is the language spoken by all beings, and the guiding principle of our existence is love and unity. I think this is so beautiful. A world devoid of conflict, fear, manipulation, and sorrow. Well, then I invite you, let's take the first step here in our meeting, and let's go to the text, to this beautiful chapter by Gelson. So, Gelson starts this chapter saying that Joannei de Angelis, in her book, The Awakening of the Spirit, another beautiful book by Joannei, she states that affection gives human existence meaning, allowing it optimistic striving, continuous effort, permanent interest, and the achievement of new values to progress and ennoble oneself. This is Joannei speaking. And then she also says, despite the rich possibilities of affection, however, human relationships are based on demands, expectations, and projections, leading to confusion and misunderstandings, which make those involved lose their freedom. He says that for Jung, only objectivity guarantees a true relationship. And he's going to say later in the chapter what he understood that Jung meant by objectivity. And later I would love to see Corbett's opinion about that. But then the author, Gelson, asks, but what does he mean by this? What does Jung mean by this? Objectivity. How to define objectivity in relationships? Why are relationships one of life's most difficult arts? So since we are not seeing a PowerPoint, we can stop at any time, right? If anyone wants to make a comment or ask something, okay? I thought of this since we are talking about the mystery of the encounter, so that this encounter of ours today should be like, have some mystery and not a PowerPoint slide going, you know, so that we cannot see each other or exchange ideas. Well, and so you just say, Anahy, and then we stop, and Anne has something to say. Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, because I think that this topic is just so relevant, because if we have difficulty in our relationships, whichever form they take as individuals, then that extends to the whole of society. And then how do countries get on with one another if the people can't even establish their relationships? But I think it's something that when I grew up, I don't know about others, and you never really learn about it. Nobody sort of, gave you a good explanation. I'm an older woman, and it was like, you might need to find a rich husband to keep you. That was an objective. And obviously going back quite a few centuries, that was like a career, but nothing about how do you establish relationships? How do you nurture them? How do you, I just find it's really useful that we're learning this, but I think we need to take it all the way down to our kids and things and be teaching it from day one, because this is absolutely essential. So I'm really glad and I'm happy and really grateful that you're bringing this topic, and this chapter is really helpful, I found as well.
Thank you, Anne. And I'll just call Mark in a second, but it reminded me that this week I was talking to some people, and because you said to teach also young people and to discuss this topic with them. And I heard that there was some people would do a trip, people interested in archaeology and things like that. And it was also like a spiritual thing, but there was a lot of things. I think a lot of people from the United States, and it was kind of a mystical experience. And the guy who was, in charge of this trip found it very interesting, because usually it's older people going, right? Coming to these events. And but there was a family, a father, mother, and two teenagers, 17 and 16. And what happened is that in the previous day, I think they left the United States through Miami, the guy was saying, and they would come to South America, maybe Machu Picchu or whatever in Peru. And okay, so the previous night, the kids had been to a rave, those crazy parties all night long, and they had their mobiles stolen. So what happened, and that in the first, the trip was supposed to be 2 weeks, and the first week, the teenagers wouldn't leave their rooms in the morning. They would sleep until, midday. They would be really feeling very, very upset, not making contact or having conversations with anyone. And I think some of you know that I have a daughter who's a pediatrician, and she said, yes, it's like, being out of drugs, that if you have some addiction and then you just stop because of dopamine and things like that in the brain, that you have the cycle of gratification in the brain. So it was awful. They, and when they would be in contact with other people, they would, be mad, didn't want to talk to anyone. So I was wondering, I kept wondering, and while I was reading again Gelson's chapter, how much we are missing to exactly what Anne said, to talk with our kids, teenagers. I don't know if you guys receive here in United States, I was talking, here in Brazil, I'm all over the place, right? So here in Brazil, the WhatsApp and the mobiles, it's a big thing, the Instagram too, So people are together, and I learned that there is even they made a kind of a term in the United States, I don't know, in Europe, they call virtual distance, because then everybody's together, or the family's together, but each one of the people in the family, the people in the family are with their mobiles or are in the Instagram or talking to people that are not present. So what's going on that we cannot see each other, that we cannot, what is it, we have we get upset, or we cannot read each other's emotions anymore. So let's see what Mark, and we cannot teach our, and what I was going to tell is that here in Brazil, it's a big thing. Very young people, and I don't know if she wants me to introduce her, but we have Luciana from Brazil, and she's a teacher, also a spiritual teacher of very young and babies, right, Luciana, and young children. And what we know here in family groups, a lot of people taking pictures of the children and filming them doing things the whole time, and putting in the WhatsApp family group. And okay, it's cute, we like to that, to see the babies and all of that, but imagine the baby growing up with mobiles and screens in their faces. So they get used to that, and not used to really being alone with the mother and father and the others, and just human interactions. So let's talk about that. Mark, you want to talk?
Yes, thank you, Anahy. I struggle with I struggle with pronunciation, but
Don't worry.
And so wonderful, in my opinion, also your adaptation and creativity with a perhaps different format and a little more interactivity and dialogue. And I mean, to this question about objectivity, I just offer to our space that highlighting that the first relationship, though, and I think this is the wonderfulness of this work in various ways, or potential, is with oneself. Everything else is secondary. And I guess, in that first paragraph, what, I was noticing is that nowhere is there, though, the mention of just basic human needs, which I think you're kind of touching on. We have all this technology, but we have removed the physical, and that as far as that relationship, in my understanding and practice and journey, rather than going up, I've needed to go down to the physical, which is the relational in actual real life. I've needed to go, down to the root, then down to the sacral and the emotional, beneath mind, beneath solar plexus. And just a little bit of offering of terminology. I'm challenged about the use of the word bad and the use of the word evil, because I find that though anymore, evil is, in my understanding, something that we have created from a human perspective, which has a huge amount of judgment sitting in it anymore, as opposed to non-judgment, which I think really, when people get put with that word bad or evil, that decreases focusing on oneself, shame, guilt, wounds, trauma. So I offer that to the space. And then I just reinforce your last point about, the example with your daughter and, let's say, the generation behind us is not being present, because not being in the physical. So I guess I certainly try to create in my spaces, actually people getting together and taking this global and taking the technology and bringing it down to the local in these types of spaces, groups, where we're having to practice what we preach. So thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Mark. And I was listening to you and remembering that when I was a psychiatrist resident, many years ago, we used to it was very psychoanalytic, very Freudian based, but it was in a hospital, our training, and we used to go in psychiatry training to obstetrics, to the floor of obstetrics, and we had to observe the mother breastfeeding the baby, and many times also in the interaction with the father. But one of the things, because you talked about the body, right? So one of the things, and and I think most of you also travel a lot, and it came just this memory that I was in some airport or something, and then I saw a mother breastfeeding the baby, but working in the computer at the same time. And one of the things that we learned so many years ago, and that it's still, as the sense of identity, and the sense that I am, starts from very early, with the mother breastfeeding the baby, because it's eye-to-eye contact, and the discernment that the breast is something different from myself, and that I feel hungry or have some kind of feeling that it's very discomforting or something. But when the comfort comes, the milk comes, I have at the same time the eye-to-eye contact, the feeling, the touching, the smell of that being, right? And this is so important for me to for the ego, let's say, to start the sense of I am, of an identity. So from birth we have all this very important interaction in the body, as you said. I was just because of you talking about the body, it reminded me. And then we have this crazy thing that technology, well, it's great because we are talking from different parts of the world, and that's okay, that's great. But at the same time, I need a space, like you said, Mark, to myself, to relate to myself, to understand my my feelings, my sensations in the body, the sense of who I am, and all of that. Let's just see what Andres has to add. And then, if you don't mind, we can go ahead in the text and stop again later. Go ahead, Andres.
Hello, everybody. I keep it really short, I promise. For me, it's always been like a modern form of slavery, which we, I think, probably not aware of. It's total human control. Absolutely a modern form of slavery, separation of humanity, total isolation of the individual. This is what I say, and it's been organized and implemented many years ago. You know what I mean? This is what I think. That is what I feel.
Thank you, Andres. Okay, so back to the text. After these questions, what does Jung mean by by objectivity? How to define objectivity in relationships? Why are relationships one of life's most difficult arts? And then Joseph says, in order to answer these questions, we must begin by stating that every relationship is a result of several psychological and spiritual elements. Among these elements, we have each person's psychological functioning, with her emotions, impulses, tendencies, qualities, flaws, spiritual condition, culture, and conditioning. We also must consider the context of her reality, with goals, hierarchy, roles, expectations, and interests of every relational field the person is involved in. Given that this doesn't happen in one side of the relationship, but in all that are involved in the relational process, one can imagine the inherent complexity of a relationship. People form arrangements, landscapes that express the dynamic and color of each encounter. We can thus conceive a group or field of relation as a product of connections individuals can make and which they establish between themselves. A network that is weaved in the relational field and made up of different threads in a tension between the individual and the collective, the spiritual and the material, among others. And I will stop after this poem. He talks about a poet, Madeleine Freire, that she presents, a Brazilian poet, presents us with a beautiful poem titled, I'm Not You, You Are Not Me, which reflects the nature of relationships. So I'll just read the poem and then we can discuss a little bit. I'm not you, you are not me, but I know much of me living with you, and you do you know much of yourself living with me? I'm not you, you are not me, but I found me and saw myself as I looked at you. In yours, in my insecurity, in yours, in my distrust, in yours, in my competition, in yours, in my childish tantrum, in yours, in my omission, in yours, in my firmness, in yours, in my impatience, in yours, in my arrogance, in yours, in my sweet fragility, in yours, in my terrified muteness. And did you find and see yourself as you looked at me? I'm not you, you are not me, but it was leaving my loneliness that I spoke to you. And did you speak to me in your solitude? Or did you run away from it and from me and you? I'm not you, you are not me, but I'm more me when I can see you, because you reflect me in what I still am, in what I already am, and in what I want to become. I'm not you, you are not me, but we are a group. While we are capable of differently, me being me, living in you, and you being you, living with me. So, would you like to stop now or make some comments? I think it's a beautiful poem of like summons the interaction, right? And the learning that we get from each other. And it's very, very deep. So you all have written. I just go on, so when you feel inspired, if Lionel wants to say something, that you just stop me, okay? Go ahead, Mark, go ahead.
And just,
Let's be inspired together.
Yeah, you know, inspiration and this and that is that when I really appreciated that the one phrase in there of sweet fragility, and then I was just sitting with that for a moment, and then with that word fragile in the context of the importance of resilience. And so I actually came up with like sweet vulnerability. In other words, there can be a sweetness in vulnerability which creates the space for growth, change, you know, when there's trust and empathy. So I just had never put, you know, the loveliness of poetry is to put sweetness and vulnerability. It brings a certain unique softness. And then the only other thing I would add is that word on the other side of tension. I really appreciated, you know, the combination of the spiritual and the material, because in my understandings, while I can reach for a certain calmness or a certain stillness, there's always going to be a certain amount of tension. I'm going to have a certain amount because it's the physical and the non-physical, you know, living. So, and I don't really know how very small amount of tension I can have, but this space is a valuable contribution to the lessening of that.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Mark. Exactly. We talk about this paradox, right? That we have to, you know, it's kind of a suffering, different tensions, let's say. But let's see what Sylvia wants. Go on, Sylvia.
Just very briefly, this actually remind me of one of the songs of the Beatles. I am the walrus. I am he as you are, he as you were me, and we are all together. And go on. It's very interesting, this poem, because it looks to me as if there is a lot of transference, isn't it? I feel the point that Mark said, my fragility, and in a way, the person feels to me as if in looking at somebody else, it's reflecting, oh, I feel like this and I feel like that because I feel like this. And it doesn't seem, although it seems quite deep somehow, it doesn't really feel as if the person is really being true to analyzing themselves, going deep into themselves and actually exploring their own. It's almost like they are exploring themselves, but in relation to what they see on other people, and they imagine what other people is like. It's really good, actually, in a point of thinking and imagining how am I going to deal with my own pain, with my own fragility, with my own lack of trust and, you know, my self-worth and all that kind of thing. It's very interesting to awaken, actually, the things that we normally do in life. We see somebody else and we reflect, constantly reflecting, and we think it's ours, but we're sending out instead of actually going deep within. And I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying, but I think something to think about, be aware of.
Thank you, Sylvia. Should we go ahead, or somebody wants to? Lionel, would you like to comment anything at this point? I think you have to unmute yourself, the microphone.
Sorry. I'm a bit worried about this notion that we have to see the other person objectively. That doesn't make any sense. How can you see a person objectively? Well, I mean, right at the beginning, he talks about how we have emotions, we have feelings, we have expectations, we have interests. So when we look at another person, we're looking through a lens that is colored by all that. To me, it makes no sense that you could ever see another person objectively. I don't know where he gets that from. I don't know what that means even.
Okay, let's go.
I don't want to be objectified anyway.
Yes, I understand what you mean.
I would love to hear more about it. What do you mean by looking objectively versus subjectively, Professor Corbett?
Well, in this essay, he says, how does he put it? He says something, I forget how he said it, but he talks about objectivity guarantees a real relationship. I think I can't see that. When we look at another person, the way we feel about another person is colored by all our life experiences, relationships with parents and so on, needs and hopes and expectations. All that is coloring the way we feel about another person. So, and Jung calls that the personal equation. That's the only part of it that worried me.
Okay, I think I'll just jump a little bit. We can jump and go back again to see what Gelson really wanted, because he talks a lot, Lionel, about, as you said, everybody saw in and listened to this first before the poem, this field of relation as a product of connections individuals can make, in which they establish between themselves this network, right? And he talks about the complexity of ourselves. I think he's just using words, right? And of course, we are we have our own subjectivity, and it's impossible for us, in a sense, to look at others through objective lens. It would be, it's a paradox. But I understand what he wanted to say later on in the chapter. I'm not sure only if Anne wants to talk first, and then I'll go back to the text. Do you want to say something first, Anne?
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying, it's in the first paragraph, it says that Jung says that you can only, I was just saying, well, what's the point of the objectivity? I just wanted to bring it. It's in the first paragraph. It says, for Jung, only objectivity guarantees a true relationship. So that Gelso is saying that that is what Jung says. And I think that further down in the text, then they'll explain what does Jung mean when he says that. I don't know if it helps, or I just messed it all up. Sorry.
No, it helps, because it's exactly this. He's making a point here. Sorry, go ahead, Lionel.
I was going to say that Jung wrote a paper on marriage as a psychological relationship, which you can find on the internet, but I don't remember it in great detail. But I don't remember him saying anything about objectivity in that essay. I wonder where Gelson got this from.
Okay. I'll just go further in the text, so then we can I'll just go here.
Okay.
Just for us to develop to go with him in his thoughts. Since emotional life is a condition of our reality, we are always subject to have affections which have part of their cause fed and provoked by others. Therefore, we are always subject to passions. Goes on. The challenge is precisely knowing we affect and are ourselves affected by life, and having the strength to create our own affections and not succumb to passions. These passions are determined by unconscious needs and forces, which for the most part we are unable to direct positively, generating several fantasies that are projected or displaced onto the other. In this sense, the lack of affection is a great obstacle for an objective relationship. You see, Lionel, he's saying that our inner world, in this sense, of course, makes it, it's a great obstacle for objective relationships.
He's contradicting himself. If we have unconscious and unconscious needs, how on earth can we be objective at the same time? I don't see this at all.
Let's go further. We don't have to agree with him, but I think we have to see. I think he's using words, Lionel, from what I understood in the chapter, to show us this paradox, okay, in relationships.
Well, what's the paradox? I'm sorry, what's the paradox?
Well, let's just take a look what he says about objectivity, okay?
Yeah.
Just before that, he says that Joanna states that when one lacks affection, the lack presents itself in the form of a distressing anxiety, which generates conflicts and dissatisfaction as soon as it's attended to. In this case, it produces uncertainty about remaining loved after satisfying the hunger for physical or emotional contact, which soon gives way to insecurity and distrust. Thus, love becomes dependent and not fulfilling. The person transfers to the loved one his/her needs of safety, demanding to receive back the same disorderly dose of emotion he or she discharges upon the loved one. This is a childhood externalization of emotional dissatisfaction that has been transferred to adulthood and remain unsatisfied. So here he's talking about one-to-one and citing Joanna, talking about couples, okay? Among the various fantasies produced by childishness, one in particular has been culturally fed and reinforced for centuries: marriage as a search for the lost paradise. We cast upon the other the responsibility for our happiness and conceive marriage as an obligation on his or her part to fulfill our expectations and an image of a golden dream where the other completes us. Nobody can grant happiness to anybody else, for happiness is a matter of existential attitude. One can grant an education, love, information, support, etc., but not happiness. Joannei de Angelis states that every marital relationship or emotional commitment is an emotional investment with the risk of not resulting in the satisfaction one hopes to receive. When we place the obligation of our happiness upon the other, we are confusing two things. First, the function of marriage, and second, the idea of happiness. And he goes on in about the function of marriage, this confusion that people do, and the idea of happiness. But we can go and come back later. I just want to get to the point where he talks about objectivity. Okay. So expanding the topic beyond marital relations, in which every relationship provides opportunities for an encounter, we can find here the basis of existence. The image we currently make of reality is brought to us by the idea of a network of relationships in which all things are called upon to cooperate. We could say everything is an encounter, and it is within this series of encounters that we establish the dynamics of life. But if everything is an encounter, then it's important to know what results from this encounter. It is this result which will tell us whether the encounter was good or bad. What is a good or bad encounter? Okay, then he goes on. In an encounter, there is an intensification of the differences that affect each other. And it's through the clash of differences and the unifying force of sympathies that we grow. It is through differences that a destabilizing effect may be initiated upon us. When each being's potentials are fortified and renewed, we then say that it was a good encounter. For Joanna, a good relationship is that which results from a contact which inspires and provides well-being without fearful or repulsive content, which generate anxiety and uneasiness. When an encounter generates a destabilization of one's creative forces, promoting a disorder which weakens the person, then that's a bad encounter. Thus, as Joannei de Angelis asserts, every relationship should enrich those involved, favoring the identification of goals and means to be achieved. We now return to Jung's idea. This is Gelson saying, according to which objectivity guarantees a real relationship. By objectivity, it is meant a necessity of knowing the other and oneself. So there is a good encounter. It's in this context, knowing as much as possible. even throughout our own subjectivity, of course. So he says that we must achieve the ability to perceive ourselves and others and learn to discern by which means to do it. In answer to this search for objectivity and common goals, which is the good encounter, we can summarize the following steps. This is his idea, okay, Lionel? He gives 4 steps. First, we must know people's nature, or try to know as best as we can people's nature as well as ours, in order to improve on it. Second, we must create an ability to deduce the differences and agreements among the elements involved in the relationship. Third, we must see that each person may suffer through the contact. And 4, we must associate these elements to people's nature. So I think, Lionel, that he is proposing, and I think it's his understanding, not that he's denying that we are, of course, because in the beginning he talks about complexity, our own complexity, our own networks, let's say, network of complexes in our, and of course the archetypes and all that are manifest in our lives. But I think he's using the language to propose that we try to be objective, okay? And in a search, like in a search for objectivity as much as we can, and to try to understand our own nature. And I think he's talking here, Lana, about being truth to oneself. You know, like when we face our shadows, and really pay attention and be objective in this sense. Okay, really discern that this is my shadow that I'm projecting onto other people or in my relationship, like really getting to know, trying to get to know our inner world. I think that's what he wanted to, at least that's why I understood. I don't know if other people want to say something, but only these 4 steps. And I think you all have his chapter in hand. We can try to discuss, because this is not saying that anyone is right or wrong. We are just debating his proposal, his idea of this mystery that is this encounter, that when we are intimate, or when we approach each other. So he's saying here 4 steps is his proposition, that we must try to know as best as we can our own nature and other people's nature, that we must create an ability to deduce the differences and agreements among the elements involved in the relationship, that we must try and see each person, that each one of the persons involved in the relationship may suffer through the contact, and that we must associate these elements to people's nature, the elements that, you know, that are involved in the relationship. Would you like to comment, Lionel, or anybody else?
Well, I was just struck by the first one, where he says we've got to know people's nature in order to improve on it. I can just imagine what my wife would say if I said, I want to know your nature so I can improve it for you. I mean, you know, that's not a good basis for a relationship. And then number 4, I don't know what number 4 means. What elements is he talking about?
The elements, I think in the previous item, we must see what each person may suffer through the contact.
Yeah.
And you know, and we must associate these elements to people's nature.
Well, but I still don't understand what the elements are that he's talking about. Oh,
We can invite Gelson to say what he was. Well, we had to, someone will have to translate because he doesn't speak in English.
yeah.
But it's what I can understand talking to him so many times, you know, Lionel, that it's his vision of this mystery that it's when we get in contact. Maybe the translation to English, because the Portuguese we talk in very, maybe Anne can help, in very big sentences, right? And even if you translate, usually if you translate a word to English, it's not going to sound the same thing as we use in Portuguese. I think the translation here would have to be, but what I can tell you is that he's trying, because this is for general people, it's not for people, you know, that are specialists or things like that. So he's trying to give people like a path to understand that relationships are complex, that our own nature is very complex. We are complex beings, and that we learn and to respect this complexity. And when we approach each other, that's my translation. I don't know, each one of you can have different translations. But when we approach each other, we should do this with respect, with compassion, to, as Mark was saying previously, try not to judge people, right, Mark? Like saying, this is evil, this is bad, because we do this all the time, since we know we have already studied the mechanisms of the defense of the ego, right? And we know that we tend to project onto others the difficulties that we have, our shadow aspects, right? So we tend to judge each other. I understand what Lionel says, that if he talked to his wife, I want to know your nature, maybe she would be, you know, like paranoid or something. Of course, and I don't know if Lionel, you and Mark, I think, and Sylvia, people that are from the psychological field, many times we have this problem because people, you know, oh, I'm not going to talk to this person because he's a psychologist or he's a psychotherapist, he's an analyst, so he will know, or he will, you know, see my nature, blah, 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 all this that we know already. And this is impossible. I think this is what Gelson was trying to say, Lionel, that we must try to be objective in a sense, you know, within our subjectiveness. You know what I mean? Try not to judge, try to understand that we have our defense mechanism, that we are going to see other through also our projections, and respect other people's nature in general. Like, we want them to respect ourselves. Go ahead, Fabrício. I know you have had, maybe you already have had this discussion with Gelson in Portuguese. What's your idea about?
Okay, before I go, I think Karen, she had her hands raised first. Karen, do you want to go first?
Okay, thank you, Fabrício. Well, Anahy, I was thinking about this discussion and reading the text or this chapter. I'm not sure if I understood correctly, but I was reflecting about what Joanna said for us, that the journey is so hard in terms of understand ourselves, and also to have this the objective comprehensive related to our relationship self. But my understanding is, in a moment that we are wake up for that our relationships are so complex in a way that we project ourselves, and they project also. And it is not related sometimes with our inconscience, but also about our spiritual life with other or past relationships. Sometimes we will try to observe better the way that we will receive the message from the other, understanding that, yes, that maybe there can have some kind of noises that can impact, and collect it in a good way. Despite that, I react immediately. It means that in our family relationships, in a way that we need to listen more and try to understand that sometimes is not the time for us to react directly, but collect and try to talk. Try later maybe to understand what kind of energy, what kind of projections or other messages can be part of that, to turn it a good meeting, not a bad meeting in terms if we not collect. I'm not sure if I understood right, but it was my comprehension on that way. And I related to be objective. Not objective in terms of the moment, because our inconscience is constantly there, but in a way that we collect, okay, the others and sometimes our internal messages.
Yes, it's important, Karen, because you brought the spiritual part, because we are also seeing through the lens of the Spiritist knowledge, right? So this is further down the chapter, but it's exactly one important part of all this complexity of our inner world is because according to Joanna, we bring to us not only the experiences of this life, but the experiences of past lives. And usually we reincarnate among people that we have issues with, and that we are supposed to, let's say, adapt to each other in a better way, in a creative way, with more, in a more loving way that we can have, or maybe that in the past we had an inability to love someone, and I thought about someone as my enemy. So we know that when we look through the lens of reincarnation, and according to a lot of mediums, all the many books psychographed by Chico Xavier and Divaldo, that we are going to experience, and we are going to go, to have another try, let's say. We are going to have another possibility to harmonize ourselves, to learn how to love even people that we thought as enemy in other lives. And this, I think it's a very, very, Lionel, I think Karen brought a very important point. I was getting there, warming up, But the thing is that if we consider the Spiritist knowledge, then things get much more complex, because we are talking about our spiritual, let's say, luggage, or our spiritual learning and experiences, and how they manifest in this world. So, and I think I want to listen to Fabrizio, but I'm just going to give you one thought to think about. We are still talking about these days, with all that we know about psychology, about ourselves. Of course, it's not that much, let's say, otherwise we wouldn't have wars in the world. But we know that for many people, things like wars and corruption and things like that don't make any sense at all, right? And I want to exchange to you an experience. I was, and if I think it was recorded, and if it's recorded, Fabricio, and it's available to public, then I will put in our WhatsApp group for everybody to see. But I was very fortunate to be invited to a meeting with a psychiatrist from the World Psychiatry Association. And there were 4 psychiatrists with 4 different traditions. One one representing Christianity, another Judaism, I think, another Muslim, and Hinduism. Okay, the 4 big, let's say, traditions. And it was wonderful, and it was really great how, and Lionel, they didn't know much about Jung. Okay, of course, my role was to put everything together, and you know, what everybody was saying, and to talk a little bit about faith and in the different traditions. And it's very, very interesting how using, and I'm talking to you now, guys, of course, as a Jungian analyst, but also as a student, let's say, of the Spiritist knowledge and different spiritual traditions, because we have to learn lots of, including different religions and things like that. And it was really great. One of the things, Lionel, you talk a lot about the dark side of the self, that the Muslim colleague, she brought some parts of the Quran, the sacred text, and which I had never seen. And in the major spiritual traditions and religions, if you go in the core of them, there are all the spiritual values are there, you know, the compassion and fraternity and the, you know, the humanity as being a big family, independent of the way and our cultures and all of that. So it was really great, and it was really great, Lionel, using depth psychology. And when we talk about the archetypes and we talk about this concept of unity that is deep within our psyche that Jung brings. So I think this is very important, because if we put together the Spiritist knowledge and we said, okay, and I think it's very hard for different cultures, and I'm so happy that Fabricio, Marcia, Jusada, and many other people that are trying to bring in different countries, all the putting together with Gelson and I and a lot of other people, to put together all that we know of psychology and we have learned together with this concept that Spiritist knowledge brings, that we can be now, I can be this person in my ego, I have this identity, but I have, of course, if I work together objectively, since we are talking about subjective and objective way of looking to things, through the lens of Spiritist knowledge, of course. Okay, so today I'm in Brazil. Yesterday in my spiritual life, I was whatever, a Native American person, an Africa person, a Muslim, whatever. So what's the point of me fighting somebody from another culture? From this perspective, there's no point at all. Somebody that I'm feeling as an enemy today and I'm harming in a way. Yesterday in my spiritual life could have been my son or daughter. So it doesn't make any sense. And the hurt that I'm going to be feeling as a spirit, if I see that I have hurt someone that I should have loved, only to talk about the mystery of the encounter, right? And our relationships in families. I think it would be really great, the hurt, you know. And I wish many more books have already been translated to English. I just want to, it remind me, and I think I have to tell you this, and I hope Fabricio or Marcia or Anne or maybe Luciana can help you remember the name of the medium. That is when she talks about the night in France where the Protestants were killed. Saint Bartholomew night?
Ivone Pereira. Ivone Pereira,
Ivone
Anahy.
Pereira. Thank you so
Noite das
much.
Flores, yeah.
The night of Saint Bartholomew, is that right? The name of the
Saint Bartholomew, yeah, with the Maria de Medici.
And when I just now, people, I wish you could have read this book, and I wish it's going to be, I hope it's going to be translated, because it gave me such an impact. The medium, Ivone Pereira, is, you know, it's beautiful the way she psychographed the book. I can't remember the name of the spirit, Sylvia, can you remember? Was Victor Hugo?
No, Dr. Bezerra de Menezes. The
Oh,
difference
doctor,
that he used to take her to see everything, and then she would write the book. He would
wow.
take her to the what happened, and then he would dictate the book, but she had already seen what happened. Yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry, about this
Fabricio
book, it's written by Ivone Pereira by herself. She was it's her history. She was a spirit at this time, and it was her story. It's not a spirit, it's herself.
Oh, thank you, Anna. I couldn't remember because I got mixed up.
It's a trilogy. Yeah, it's a trilogy, and one of them is in the three books. It's about her story, and she was one of the personages of this time. Yes, the characters. Yeah. Yes.
Let's not give people spoilers, because I hope Hollywood discover this. They're, you know, they have to film this kind of books. And what happened? But I just want to one image. I can't remember which was her character in the book, but one image. The guy comes to the protest. They were nobles, right, in the border of Germany and France, something like that. And the guy who was the chief of the army or something of the queen, right, gets to this castle where this noble family were praying with the servants, something like that, and because they were Protestants. And then this guy who had been friends, the chief of the army, had been friend and been raised with the kids from the family. He kills everyone, right? He kills everyone because he had been, you know, the queen said Catherine of Medicine, right? Medicis, I don't know in English. And then he kills everyone. He had been friends of all of them. Okay, they were slaughtered because they were praying with the servants. And in the spiritual, it's a small spoiler, okay? It's a small, but it's just the impact. When the guy dies and in spirit, and it's, of course, he was very, very troubled, so he couldn't pass to another dimension. He was just feeling all this confusion and pain right after death. He goes back to the house where he murdered all of them. And what did he see? Did you remember Sylvia, Anna, and other people who had? Just to tell everybody once, what did he see? Everybody else. Remember Sylvia?
I can't remember. I read this book so long ago.
Oh, it's beautiful. He sees everybody there, the spirits, of course, because it was the spiritual dimension, praying in the same scene where he, you know, just ran and killed everybody. And then he was reminded that he was the son of the couple that he murdered in another life. Can you imagine that? And they were praying for him. They were waiting for him. They, of course, they had, with all the love that they had for their own son, they forgave him and they were waiting for him in the spiritual realms. So I can just imagine all this craziness and fights and wars going on. If people could have a tiny, could introject, let's say, could work with the concept that somebody that I'm killing because somebody else said I'm in an army of whichever country, and I have to obey orders, and I go there and kill this and that. If we work with the concept that we have lived many lives, and that maybe this person that I'm not recognizing is the person that was my brother, my sister, actually really in a life, because of course there is the spiritual brotherhood of man, but in another life, that was my son, my daughter, and that I'm the one that has, ended his life, his or her precious experience in this life. But sorry about that, Fabrizio, go on. We want to hear you about Gelson and try to clarify what we are talking today, the mystery of the encounter.
Well, I was gonna say, unfortunately, he has not covered that yet with the Portuguese group. But what I've been thinking here, so I don't know the answer, so I will tell you when I go through the answers with him. But I've been thinking here on his 4 proposals, and also on the question that Lionel raised regarding for the first one. I'm reading a book, is a book called, some people here might have read it. It's written by a psychologist, and he actually say, he described us as each one of us has got one language of love. The book is called 5 Languages of Love. And he says there, in order for us to have a better relationship, first of all, we need to understand our own love language. And secondly, we have to understand our partner love language so that we can communicate each other on a language that both can understand. And he says that is a way of improving relationship. So I wonder if you can make any connection there, because the first proposal that Gels was saying is to do with identify or learn or understand each other's nature. And then part of it maybe is to do with the language or the love language of someone operate. And I wonder if there is any connection there. What do you think, Lionel?
I think that's a nice phrase, but what does he mean by the love language? Does he mean the manner in which we love each other? Is that, or the words we use to express it? Or what does that mean, actually?
Yeah, he described each language. I can't remember the 5 of them now. For instance, one of them, people operate better when you give them some praise. You say, oh, your hair looks beautiful. Oh, your clothes looks nice. That's one of the language. Another one is people like to be given presents. Like, for instance, if I go out and I bring back a little souvenir, oh, look, I'm full of you, I gave you this present. That is a kind of language that he says that people operate in a love relationship. So he says when we understand that language, we can improve our relationship, and then we can speak to each other in a language that each other can understand.
I see. So he's talking about the emotional need.
Yes.
That we need, the type of emotional need we want the other to meet. Yeah. Yeah, I see.
And I wonder if there is any connection there we can make in terms of when Gelson said about the nature. Like, but I will tell you all when I actually go through with him on the Portuguese group.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can tell him, because the purpose of this kind of groups, people, that we say self-discovery, is not to be, it's to be open to different ways of thinking and to make our own connections, okay, and to make our own path to learning about ourselves, as Mark was saying, that it's the most important thing, because otherwise it's kind of very difficult for us, as still is in the world, right, to try to understand each other, different cultures, different ways of thinking. So go ahead, Sylvia, because and then Fabrizio, I think it would be interesting when you get to this point, you can tell him that Lionel and I were in this meeting.
Mhm.
And this objective and subjective way of thinking that he exposed in his chapter, if he could clarify what he wanted to tell. We are
I will.
here exchanging ideas,
Mhm.
and I think it's very fruitful that we are being able to think together. But
Yeah,
if you can
just
bring his opinion.
yeah, just before we go to Sylvia, Marcy reminded us very nicely here on the chat that the 5 love languages: word of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch.
Very interesting. If you can put the name of, maybe people will be interested in the book, Fabrizio, if
Mhm.
you can put in the chat, it would be
Okay,
great.
will do.
Thank you. Sylvia, go ahead.
It's just that there is a passage in Despertar do Espírito that Joanna says, I think relate to what she says, that, you know, human beings, they need affection from other people, and this contact actually awakening them the need to the relationship, the mutual relationship between them, and makes them to love in a mature way through the difficulties and the differences that happen between the two of them. She also says that the flux of human life is manifested in the relationship that each person has with the other, and with it contributes for a better, more efficient social living together. And then she says, she goes on to say that this challenge in the relationship is the gigantic invitation of love in order to reach an existential plenitude. But then she goes on as well. It's interesting because she gives a fable that of the porcupine, I think. They were in the Arctic, and they were coming together to warm each other. But because they were so close together, helping each other and protecting each other to survive, they were hurting each other because they kept, you know, hurting each other with the thorns. And I think this is interesting, and I think it's the point, because as human beings, we are gregarious people, we need to have relationships, but sometimes the encounters, the experiences that we have can be quite challenging. And I think in a sense that it's only through this development and this constant living with other people, being challenged and challenging them, is that we learn and grow as human beings, as we develop our maturity. You know, of course, love relationship ways maybe more, but also is almost like is it's almost an unconscious thing, but we need to be all the time, touching each other, because it's the only way to grow and to be mature and understanding. And I always think of, I create sometimes for understanding things, I create imagery to me. And it reminded me of this idea that I have, that we are like a diamond in a very rough, and it's only other people, because only diamond polish diamonds, and we, the only people who polish us, is to eventually we get into the light within that we all have. But it's through the difficulties and the pain of life sometimes, and the challenges, because only other people can challenge you and you can challenge them. And through this, we grow and we become the light, the spiritual light that we are and we have within. I don't know. I thought that reminded me what Joanna said in a sense of our lives.
It's a beautiful image. Yes. Thank you, Sylvia. It's a beautiful image. I'm here with a sentence and I think we are almost getting to the time, but a sentence that where Joanna says, and she also cites Joanna, relationships of any nature always depend on the level of consciousness of those involved. Where there is psychological maturity and respectful understanding for the other, feelings easily grow deeper, and an admirable communion of interests and affinities, which further intensify as circumstances allow for the harmony of coexistence. So I think it's very important to consider that what she's saying here, that relationships of any nature always depend on the level of consciousness of those involved. And when she talks about consciousness of those involved, and she's talking about psychological maturity specifically in this sentence, but of course she talks many times about the spiritual knowledge, right? And we know that the spirit, the knowledge of the spirit and the different experiences, maybe we won't remember the experiences, but what we have learned or not learned with the experiences come with us to this life. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Thanks, Neely. I just wanted to add, I guess, on this point of exchanging ideas and the mystery of the encounter is maybe a both and offering. In other words, the spiritist and non-physical, so to speak, but also the 125 years of 4 waves of developmental psychology. There's a part of us, this question about getting past fighting, my understanding is me as a soul is not pained by fighting. It is timeless, and it's had many incarnations, and it's not having the human or the physical experiences, but it is informing them. And so and yes, my spirit has had past incarnations, and I've interacted with other spirits in a human form, but those biggest ones, in my understanding, are, the number of times I've done it with the spirits that show up as my parents or show up as my family. And it is there where I really find that the psychological, and going back to the document, which I think, again, was just a wonderful way of going about this, is when we look at conflicts and anxiety and childishness, which evokes the concept of the inner child. And so then parents and very early stages, we now have the tools to be working with those very, very early experiences, as we know. And we don't expect a child to cooperate with us. The child, the very young child, for the first 7 years, figuring things out. And so I think in a similar way, it's not possible to expect cooperation from others that are quite wounded and in their woundedness and have not done, let's say, work as it relates to the inner child. So I kind of just bring this in of a both and, the, you know, and back to this point about tension, and you know, I'm a human, but I'm also a soul. But those are two very different realities, and I can't. And just as I can't have, as a soul, I can't have the same experience that I have as a human. When I leave my body, I'm going to have a very different reality and a perspective on this. So going back to your example of meeting up in non-physical and going, oh yeah, wow, whoops, so to speak. You know, it's...
Well, Mark, yes, I understand what you're saying, but for instance, we have, I will just give to Denise, but we have been studying a lot of anomalous experiences in psychiatry and in psychology. And I myself, I told you guys that I am in a national research analyzing anomalous experiences, that it's mediumship, paranormal experiences, and synchronicities through the lens of Jung's complex psychology, okay? And what we are seeing, Mark, is that this duality, this division, it's like there is a pull, you know, or something, an impulse for an awakening, a collective awakening, because we have been evolving, as you say, psychology, developmental psychology. So we have been evolving in a sense, really, as you said, seeing ourselves, our egos, like kind of separate from something that it's precious within us. Even materialist people, you know, the Plato's conception of the soul. So we have this conception that is something that is precious within myself. But it's like time is running, you know, faster these days. There is a pull for an awakening, in a sense that we must manifest, we must help, let's say, our egos through this self-discovery, through this expansion of consciousness. Joanna talks about cosmic consciousness. Okay, so of course we are not like Buddha or Siddhartha Gautama. We are not going to probably enlighten ourselves in one life, but going further and believing that we can integrate, you know, Mark, because if we believe that things are apart, you know, we have been talking about this last year, and I really appreciate if people who are listening can go back in Fabrizio's Bournemouth, right, YouTube channel and see other meetings from last year, because we have talked about the ego self, you know, axis, and the need for the ego to mature, to be mature enough to pay attention, not from something that comes from outside information. It's within us. It's in the self, capital S, our imago Dei, right? Our higher self. So this information and Spiritist knowledge says that we are living a very, very special moment in this history of mankind, of human beings, you know, where it's our consciousness is evolving. And I think from the Jungian point of view, and Lionel had to leave, but he knows that I think like this, being a Jungian analyst, and sometimes he agrees in part with what I'm saying from the point of view of the Spiritist knowledge. that it brings together with Jung's complex psychology, let's say, instruments for our ego to not be so afraid of ourselves anymore, not be so afraid of imagining. Well, I can just imagine what I was telling you about Ivone Pereira, her wonderful book, is as if, you talked about the inner child, Mark, we see a lot of science fiction movies, right? We see a lot of we read a lot of books. So if I myself am not only this person, have lived many lives, what's the impact in my own subjectiveness, since we were talking about this? And I think that's why what Gelson wanted to say, and that Lionel got a little mixed up, it's very objective to talk about our subjectiveness, if I could say that, right? It's about our complexity, about the ways that the ego finds, wow, awesome, that there is a mystery within myself. I don't remember my past lives, at least at this point. I don't know if other people here have had any information. But I understand and I feel deep within myself that I have lived many lives, because there are things that I cannot explain. For instance, as I told you, the first time that I have been to London, I told Anne about that. I felt like I was getting, oh, okay, I'm home again. And I felt I knew, Hyde Park or whatever, or this and that. And I had never been. And that was 3 decades ago, I think, the first time. And okay, from where this deja vu, and it was previously the internet with a lot of images, okay? So where this information that you cannot explain, it's not rational, remember the psychological types, but it's an intuition, and it's something that comes from within. We know that you have, that it's very, there are feelings there, that it's a knowledge that you cannot explain rationally. So I think that it's very, very important that we start working with these concepts, that these concepts help us, that we don't get so stuck, in the feeling function. Oh, this word and that word and this concept and this concept. And of course, I'm talking to you through my extroverted feeling function. And we have different types, psychological types, of understanding even ourselves and what we are saying. But through my feeling function, I can tell you, and of course, everybody has a feeling function, but that we have to get in contact. Elsoli was asking about the inferior function, and we have to, and I will put a note in the WhatsApp group, okay, Elsoli, I haven't forgotten about your question. Just to finish this point and to give to Denise, and to Fabrizio, I think it's so important that we don't get stuck in words, and we can feel the feeling that the sentence, that this conversation, this meeting, that people that are going to be listening to this later on, the feeling that I feel in my heart, not only in my head, the concepts, or if I agree with this or that, but the feeling that I feel, the images that bring, that, this, all this conversation have brought to me, and the intuitions and the memories, as I remember the book, and Fabrizio remembered the other book, and Sylvia and other people here, because this is the network, and this is our spirits, our higher selves talking to each other. If we get stuck in the egos, in our egos, in the way that the ego interprets, and in our persona, oh, I'm MD, I'm this and that, I'm doctor, I'm a psychologist, I'm this and that. That doesn't matter at all when we are talking from the spiritual point of view. It matters only in this complexity that makes me perceive or not, understand or not, or better or worse, what we are talking today. So I would urge everybody to be very patient with ourselves, with each other, and just connect to this piece of light that mentors and light teachers such as Joanna wants to bring to us. Just hypothesis if we can't accept some things, but I can at least make assumptions or, play with the idea. And if I play with the idea and an emotion comes from deep within myself, wow, then a light and a connection and an insight will be made, and maybe I will perceive things differently. Sorry about that, Denise and Fabricio and Ana Paula. And if people need to leave, it's okay. But I really would love to listen to you all before we close. Denise, I think you were the first one.
Hello. Thank you very much. I found quite interesting everything. I think a lot of people brought very important contributions. Actually, I'm daring to say something because I'm not psychologist, psychiatrist, and I'm not a profound connoisseur de spiritism. But I'd like to connect things that Fabricio, Lionel, and other people mentioned, even Mark, I remember now, about the the importance of the early years of childhood. And I understand the important role that the spirit, since the very beginning, the spirit plays in everyone's life. But I remember, and I went to my telephone many years ago when my children were young. We at the school, we were that time in Vienna, in Austria, and the psychologist, because I can see that we parents and people, we get a lot of help nowadays to parenting. Well, this is my understanding. Of course, there are still a lot of problems in education, but we have tools. There are people that study and help us. And I remember and like to share one of the tools that the psychologist, his name is De Bono. I think most of you know him. He talks about the 6 hats. It's about how connecting to personality, how to talk to kids. And so, for instance, just to mention quickly, the white hat. So what he wants to say, that when we want to create a bond, a connection, we have to understand what the other one wants to express. Mostly a kid that there is not completely fully developed his or her consciousness. So we have to understand what's going on. So the white hat would be a talk about someone that has a personality that likes to talk about information, data, needs. The black hat is about difficulties, potential of problems, or why something may not work. There are people that they go straight to the point that they can see things that they will not work, but they doesn't need to say, to understand they are pessimists. The blue hat, for instance, would I would say, manage process, next steps, action plans. Someone that has this kind of personality. Yellow hat, values, benefits, why something may work. Maybe the positive people or optimist. The green hat, creativity, solutions, alternative ways to do things. So very creative people, ideas. The red hat, feelings. So just to mix up, maybe to bring more complication for our discussion of today, but this helped me a lot. And I think that thinking about kids, that's the first you mentioned about breastfeeding, things like that. So just a way to take in mind, pay attention that spirit plays an important thing, of course, but until this maturity, there is a gap that we can, let's say, fulfill with some tools. I don't know if I could make me understand.
Thank you so much, Denise. And Marcia has put the book in the chat if people want to just go there and check. We are past the time to finish. Fabrizio and Ana Paula. Fabrizio, I'm with you guys if you want to.
Mine is just a quick one. I just spoke to Gelson, and he would have loved to join us, but he's not at home. He said, I would have joined if I was at home. But what he said, he's more than happy to take any questions related to the lesson today. And he's more than happy to answer us. So I will say that to Lionel, and I will say to everyone here, if you want to write it up, your question, I'm more than happy to take that up to Anahy and Gelson, and then we can bring back to the group.
And
Thank you, Fabrizio.
I was just going to say that Anahy was right, and the spirit is Charles, who sort of dictated the books to Ivone Pereira, even though she was part of the story and everything, and she remembering, she saw all the scenes, and then she found out that she was there, things like that. But so the spirit is Charles. And
Thank you so
I think
much.
that the psychological types of Jung and all the notions that we are learning can help us to understand more about the nature of people. And okay, it's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. So see you next month. And thanks for a very great discussion.